My name is Kate Sclavi, and I'm a teaching artist with young audiences of New Jersey and Eastern Pennsylvania. Today I'm going to be providing a supplemental workshop on my clay exploration residency with Creative Beginnings. We're going to be focusing on process-based learning, choice-based education, and following the needs of the child. We're really wanting to instill within students this idea that they have the right to choose their path of learning. Today we're going to be learning strategies for working with clay as a teaching tool. Clay teaches sensory experimentation, imaginative play, mathematical reasoning, and language development. What we're going to be doing is focusing on the process rather than the product. As you can see in some of these student examples, we're not working on creating any finished clay sculptures, and we don't have an exemplar. In this work, every student is good and every student is an artist. Many people have had the life experience of being told that you are not something because you are not good at it. So many of us have had an experience in school where we're told we are not an artist because we weren't good. The idea of this type of learning is for us as the teachers to not dictate what is good or what students should make, but instead give them creative tools, creative materials to explore, focusing on what emerges through play and experimentation. And we're going to learn tools today on how to be a guide. So let's talk about materials and setup. As you can see, I have two very simple, very basic tools in front of me, and that's intentional. We're going to be working just with our hands. We're not going to be using any clay tools, which I'll talk about in a minute. We're going to be using clay. I like to use modeling clay, and we're going to be using a mat. So let's talk about the kind of clay that we use. I'm using an oil-based clay, also known as modeling clay. It costs about $5 for a 2-pound brick, which serves about 5 to 6 students. If you don't have access to these materials, which you can get at an art supply store or online, you can also make your own Play-Doh. There's lots of recipes available online. You can use the Play-Doh you have in the classroom, though I do prefer the viscosity of this kind of clay. Or you can use air dry clay, which is more earth-based, does require water and a lot more setup. But today we're going to be using this oil-based clay. So the second thing I'm going to talk about is the mat that we're going to be working on. So this mat is not just to keep a surface clean. This type of clay you could use on a table and easily wipe off the table afterwards. But we're using this mat sort of as a canvas for students to work on. Picture this as the piece of paper that students will draw on. In this sense, this is the mat that students will be forming their clay creations on. So you want to keep it a solid color. I'm using a large piece of foam today that I've taped down. You can also use a silicone mat. You can also tape down a laminated large piece of construction paper. So let's talk about why I'm not using any tools. As you can see, I've just had my hands here. There are lots of clay tools available. You might have them even in your classroom with Play-Doh. There's ceramic tools available. But we're not going to be using any tools at all. And that's because when students have a direct sensory experience with clay, a lot of raw data will emerge. You'll find language, math, memory, storytelling will come out of when they're directly working with their hands in clay. And a lot of this work is about the sensory experience of what happens when they touch clay. So I'm going to show you how to make 3 simple forms because it provides a very basic set of skills and tools that students can use to make infinite number of possibilities. So we're not teaching them how to make anything in particular, no finished product. These are just 3 tools that they can use as they're exploring with clay. And they are a ball, also known as a sphere, a coil, also known as a snake, and a slab, also known as a pancake. So starting with the ball, what I like to do is I like to give the students first a ball of clay about the size of a golf ball, and sitting in circle time on the rug, I just let them explore with it. So I asked them to feel it, to see what it smells like, to see what happens when they poke it, and you'll start to see a lot of language will come out of that. Like students will start to say it feels cold, and then they'll notice as they move it around, it starts to become warm. They'll say it feels hard, but as they continue working with it and it warms up, the clay will become softer and more pliable. So really just allow them to explore, to see what comes out, what language you'll find comes out of that, what discoveries they find. This is part of our scientific inquiry. Once students do that, I send them back to their tables with their mat, and then I teach them how to make these 3 shapes. So starting with the ball, they take their golf ball shape and they go like this, and they make their ball. They can also make it on the table like this, and then they have a ball. The second thing I do is I teach them how to make a slab, also known as a pancake. And they might really enjoy this. They might enjoy standing up if they need the pressure, but they use the palm of their hand and they smush it down like this. And again, this is where they can start to do scientific inquiry and experimentation. Don't tell them they can make their slab thinner and wider. Let them discover that for themselves. So they'll start to notice as they start to stretch out their hand, it's beginning to get wider. But just begin to notice what they're doing. Then you're going to teach them how to make a snake. So for that, I like to teach them to roll up the pancake and then begin to use this motion. So it's in and then out. So this is where you bring in a lot of hand-eye coordination. Some students like to think of it as a worm. You can also use the word coil. But you'll find that students will begin to press really hard here maybe, and it breaks. So that's where you want to teach them to stick it back together and keep going. So they'll practice on being even and smooth. And this again is scientific thinking. They'll figure these things out for themselves. So once you have your toolkit of those 3 shapes, you can let the students begin. And this is where it's really important for you to work as a guide. So you're not asking them to make anything in particular. You're not telling them what to do. You're not finding an end goal. You're simply walking around the room and noticing. You're observing, noticing, and encouraging. And I like to divide where I see things into a few categories: scientific inquiry, language development, and mathematical reasoning. So now we're going to talk about some questions that you can ask and some tools to help you guide your students for these different types of learning. The first one is sensory. So when you start to see students who are really exploring the material, wrapping the clay around their fingers, smelling it, some of them might do repetitive motion like pounding or poking. There's nothing wrong with that. It's okay that they're not making a picture. What you can do there is you can start to encourage learning out of them. You can say, I notice that you are poking the ball of clay. Can you make a hole? Can you poke it all the way through? So this way we're not punishing students for their play and exploration, but rather we're encouraging scientific experimentation, scientific thinking, problem solving, hypotheses, experimentation, things like that. The next one is mathematical thinking. So you're also going to see students start to do things like make a lot of one kind of shape. So when they do that, you might want to go over to them and ask them questions. Questions such as, how many balls did you create? Can you make 10 more? I noticed that you're making your balls go across your mat. Can you make them stand up? You might also start to notice that students will take their snake shapes and begin to form shapes onto their mat. And there you can start to ask them what kind of shapes they're making, what they see. Some of the students might begin to even go from 2-dimensional to 3-dimensional. Some students might even start to take their ball shape and start pinching it, turning it into a cube. So here's where you can really begin to encourage learning here. You can talk about 3-dimensional into 2-dimensional shapes. A sphere can turn into a circle. And then you'll begin to see some language development. As students are playing, they may begin doing some self-talk, talking through a story that they're creating based around dreams and memories and life experiences, things they were learning. And in there you can really encourage this language to come out. You can say, what's happening in your picture? What kind of story are you creating? Tell me about the people in your story. Where are they going? Where are they going next? What are they saying? And you'll find that students might begin to build a story. Another important thing about language development and storytelling is it's important to not go up to the student and say what you think you see. Because a lot of times it's not going to be anything close to what you think you are seeing. So it's important to go up to your student and say, what is it that you're making? Finally, let's talk about documentation. Because these are very ephemeral works of art, the clay goes right back into the container when it's done. You might want to document this beautiful learning that you're seeing. So what I like to do is I like to walk around the room, and as I'm working as a guide to pull out these different learning objectives, I like to bring my phone and a little notebook. And what I do is when I see something that looks really exciting to me, I take a photograph of it from top down. And then sometimes I take a photo of it next to the picture with the student's name, and I ask them to title their work. If they don't have a title, I ask them to tell me something about their picture. And then later I'll group these photos into categories of the different learning objectives that I've seen. So that way you can really provide an assessment strategy and you have documentation of this magnificent work. Every student comes to the classroom on any given day in a different place. And they have many different experiences leading up to their learning and many different ways of learning. So this is a way for us not to direct the way they will learn, but give them the tools so that they can figure out their own way to learn. And it's our job as a guide to bring that learning out of them. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you and your students have so much fun exploring and experimenting with clay.